talking about? You guys are good.
Yeah, these are great props. Did you make these yourself?
Hey, we are on something of a clock here.
In one episode of Legends of Tomorrow, a young George Lucas gets caught in the middle of a fight with the Legion of Doom, and is so shaken that he leaves film school to become an insurance salesman, and never creates Star Wars or Indiana Jones. As a result of this disruption to the time stream, both the team's resident scientist and historian are rendered powerless.
Well, how do you expect me to understand any of that?
Without the inspiration of Lucas's films, the teammates never pursued their studies and became heroes.
You have to make your movies so that we can become who we're supposed to become, so we can save you.
While certainly a nice tribute to the great man, the episode rises above mere whimsy by highlighting fiction's great capacity to inspire new ideas and industries. And if you don't believe me, here's Jason Rubin, the co-founder of Naughty Dog, talking about his inspiration to become a game designer.
I've told this story a lot of times, so we'll start. I apologize if people have heard this,
worries.
but I walked out of Star Wars at 7 years old, which would have been 77 when it came out, and really wanted to create universes and be like George Lucas. That was my dream.
The larger point to address here is that there exists an entire generation of people whose lives were guided by the advent of the blockbuster film in the 70s and 80s, a moment which shifted the entertainment industry to the center of Western culture and gave it the incredible power it today wields over society, its people, and their passions. All of this leads to a question, eminently applicable to most anyone watching this video. Where Star Wars inspired a generation of scientists and inventors, what will be the legacy of contemporary entertainment? Today there is of course no larger film franchise than the Marvel Cinematic Universe, a project as ubiquitous as it is successful, with several of its films ranking amongst the highest grossing of all time. While earning itself legions of fans, Marvel's films often leave me with the impression that I've accidentally rewatched something I've seen before, likely because the films are mostly designed the same way. One firm example of this that I can point to is a similarity in plot structure between Iron Man, Ant-Man, and Doctor Strange. Hopefully it will be fairly obvious in this comparison.
Circuits are made to be broken. Come on!
Sir, there is a potentially fatal buildup of ice occurring.
Great idea, Tony, but my suit is more advanced in every way.
How'd you solve the icing problem?
Icing problem.
Might want to look into it.
Do not screw with the regulator. If that regulator is compromised, you would go subatomic.
What does that mean?
It means that you would enter a quantum realm.
What does that mean?
It means that you would enter a reality where all concepts of time and space become irrelevant as you shrink for all eternity.
I'm gonna have to shrink between the molecules to get in there.
Temporal manipulations can create branches in time, unstable dimensional openings, spatial paradoxes, time loops. You want to get stuck reliving the same moment over and over forever, or never having existed at all? It's too late. Nothing can stop you. Not necessarily.
This recycling of a popular formula is also clearly visible in Marvel's marketing. Just look at the latest Thor film's apparent abandonment of any previous franchise trappings in favor of the style of the far more successful Guardians of the Galaxy. But outside these examples, broader trends emerge. Marvel films share an inexplicable affinity for forgettable villains, indecisive love interest, and magical MacGuffins. And yet Marvel never seems to pay a price for such blatant self-plagiarism. Why is that? Well, so far as I can tell, Marvel's immunity to these criticisms stems from a very powerful and unique trump card, that being the cinematic novelty of a connected universe. Indeed, if plot development is a hidden structure which slowly unveils itself throughout the course of a story, Marvel's intertextuality is a kind of shorthand, whereby the appearance of characters from other films allows for the sidestepping of plot entirely, essentially a promise that there is a significant plot in progress, just not contained in this film. In this way, Marvel's broader strategy has been to hand its audience IOUs for a decade, essentially banking on the novelty of seeing characters from other films to carry the individual pictures. Even film critics are taken by this novelty at times. Leading Australian film critics Margaret Pomerantz and David Stratton once fell into this trap during their review of The Incredible Hulk in 2008, a film they both described as underwhelming, though concluded their review by noting, "The best bit is right at the end. It's a lovely foretaste of what might be some interesting films to come." Indeed, what has replaced actual plot development and innovative stories in not only Marvel films but throughout Hollywood is this kind of intertextual abuse, which has, for a time, been novel enough that it made up for any particular film's shortcomings. The Nerd Writer has a very clever video about the newfound reliance upon intertextuality throughout Hollywood, pointing out that more films are tying their central conceit or twist entirely to the audience's foreknowledge, and thereby overcoming the need for an original story. His video uses Star Trek Into Darkness and Spectre as examples of films falling back on external ideas to give the story dramatic power.
I looked up John Harrison. Until a year ago, he didn't exist.
John Harrison was a fiction, a smokescreen to conceal my true identity. My name is Khan.
The man you're talking to now, the man inside your head, is Ernst Stavro Blofeld.
Catchy name.
These twists and their accompanying moments of revelation demand that the audience carry external knowledge in order to even be intelligible, as the names Blofeld or Khan are not meaningful within the context of the individual movie. By comparison, Marvel has never done anything nearly this bad, and for that it deserves some credit. However, revelations in Marvel films are frequently self-references, events which derive their power from having been hidden in a different film entirely.
Best not to walk the streets wearing an Infinity Stone.
This is less clever than it seems, and certainly easier than writing a compelling plot, yet films that use this technique are often wildly successful. For example, The Avengers is structurally a plotless movie. A bad guy emerges, they capture him, he escapes, then they defeat him at the end of the film. There are no real twists or surprises, but the revelations which carry the picture are the cast of quippy, attractive, and above all else, established characters.
He's a front.
This becomes really interesting when you start to consider the response of mass audiences to Marvel's strategy. For the most part, this movement away from substantial self-contained stories towards a meta plot has been met enthusiastically because of the endless novelty found in assembling the connective tissue between each installment. Of this fact, Marvel seems to be acutely aware, as it goadingly places these moments in the final or post-credit scenes of their movies, like a YouTuber hiding a surprise at the end of their video. These story terminals at the end of Marvel's films are an invitation to audiences to speculate on the franchise's future, but because the films themselves are so formulaic and narratively vapid, this speculation naturally privileges business strategy over story possibility. Explaining the massive success of the franchise, for example, can be done with analogy to economics. Marvel's plan reflects the time-honored investment strategy of diversification through production of a wide variety of films in a diverse range of genres, which here stand in for investment opportunities in different industries and companies. The failure of any one film in this system is mitigated by its connection to other, more successful ones, meaning people will want to watch it even if it reviews poorly, if only to see references leading elsewhere.
You must be truly desperate to come to me for help.
But this kind of analysis only serves to demonstrate how focus has moved away from plot and story. These observations relate to the content of the films in only the most superficial respects. I am only thinking about the films as they exist as business ventures, not works of creativity or imagination. Marvel has conditioned its audience, wittingly or no, to view its films principally for the purposes of speculating on its broader business strategy, and this is the effect of changing the discourse surrounding these films. Readers clearly find this speculation interesting, and certainly more interesting than pure analysis of the content of the films themselves, with pop culture websites which once focused upon the lore of the fictional worlds now shifting their attention to the film studio's corporate strategy. IGN, for example, has lauded Marvel's move to include the Hulk in Thor Ragnarok, as it effectively serves the market demand for a new Hulk film without having to include Universal Studios, which have a stake in any solo production due to past rights sell-offs. But the fact that a business decision has informed the creative process is not addressed in the article, let alone its potentially negative consequences, and any speculation as to new story possibilities only arise tangentially as a result of the business analysis. The problem with the discursive shift aside for a moment, the fact that these films are now being written according to corporate convenience is a problem, no matter how sensible the decision may seem economically. And the problem is an obvious one, because juggernauts like Marvel will always favor continuity of business over good stories. Perhaps the pinnacle of this attitude was the cancellation of Spectacular Spider-Man, something I'm still angry about even 7 years later, and the subsequent miserable Ultimate Spider-Man series, which lent heavily on established characters and ideas from the film universe to find its appeal. Characters like Phil Coulson and the Samuel L. Jackson version of Nick Fury, who are not typical members of the Spider-Man cast, are included once again to mediate the effect of having little or no story, and a Peter Parker confronting basically no adversity. The impact of Marvel's refocusing of the popular discourse has not been contained to its own films either. DC's films are also criticized largely on the basis that they do not convey a clear business direction. How many times have you personally heard Batman v Superman's problems analyzed from a business perspective, with observations like, they are trying to copy Marvel though without laying the proper groundwork?
The film goer who's seen the Marvel movies and how they're done, and who's seen other superhero movies, and who has an idea of what DC is trying to do.
As true as this might be, it is telling that it rises to the top of any discussion about the film. Despite the myriad cynical decisions made in that film's production, the lasting popular consensus on Batman v Superman's problems are tied to poor business practice. Star Wars, by comparison, never relied upon intertextuality like this, though, of course, The Force Awakens is a keen purveyor of the Marvel playbook. The original trilogy had its own story, with its own incredible plot twists, and its world was one uniquely imaginative. Marvel's films, which all tend to be set in the same place, represent at best a dystopian corporatized version of Star Wars, which disguise a lack of substance behind gorgeous aesthetics. As much as I would love to venerate Marvel's efforts to promote comic books beyond the fringes, too often its films are a celebration of the worst aspects of the industry, pandering to audiences' expectations, relying on the intervention of other characters to create action, and forcing audiences to consume all the tie-ins in order for each individual component to make sense. What's worse, the desire to turn every franchise into a universe of interconnected component parts has relegated plot to a distant secondary concern. But the truly troubling thing about the MCU is that its central appeal remains economic rather than fictional, and its success means that it will have a dramatic impact upon the thinking of an entire generation of people. That is to say, if the Star Wars generation were scientists and inventors, the Marvel generation will be business executives and marketing professionals. And that really sucks.
Okay, that's enough.